Hey everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to be going over, you guys, this is something that has been requested since I started the channel, and I'll be completely honest with you, I was scared to make it for years, because somebody said it was hard, and then I was like, I'm not even going to try. Let me just show you. Today, we are making the mini Denver backpack, and this is from Swoon, and it might be the cutest thing we've ever made. So let me just say, when I first was working on these bags on the YouTube channel and I was making these tutorials, right off the bat, people asked, can you do a tutorial for the Swoon Denver? It's hard. And that's all it took for me to be like, nope. If you said it's hard, then it's probably too hard for me. This is not hard. There's a lot of curves. There's a lot of curves. I wouldn't say it's a beginner bag. It is an intermediate bag. There's a lot of curves, but it's not hard. It's all about picking the right material for the right pieces. And I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to hold your hand through that today. Don't worry. So not only is this pattern just like the cutest sticky pattern ever, this is also the kit for the September bag making bee club box. So everything you see here was in that box. This is the bag you're making for that month, which is so sweet because it's kind of neutral. I mean, we got some mustard, but it's mostly neutral. Okay, so let's just walk through this adorable pattern. This is such a unique design. So you see you have like this zipper that goes down the front and it folds over and you have a little lock clasp here. Once you unclasp this and open it up, you see now it's a bag kind of like this, and you can open up the zipper. Inside, we're using a water-resistant canvas for the lining. You can use quilt cotton if you like. I would go lightweight. Lightweight, lightweight. That's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. Combining vinyl, cork, something a little bit more heavy-duty with lightweight is going to be the trick to everything. So this is the mini size. There is a larger size. I have not made the larger size yet. I need to. So besides the main pocket right here, you also have these side pockets, which are so cute. They're like little chubby cheeks. You just want to pinch them. Open it up. Ba-bam! We have more pockets. So these would be great for your cell phone, for your AirPods, little things that you just want to be able to reach quickly. And then we switch it around. You see we have a handle up top, and then we have two backpack straps. Now, remember, backpack straps, these are adjustable, but if you really want to make them longer or you really want to make them smaller, because this is going to be for a little kiddo, think about that. You have enough material either way to do all this. The kit also includes webbing. I'm actually going to show you how to make these straps, all three of these straps, using material in the box, like waterproof canvas, the canvas right here, these brown canvas straps, but the kit also does include webbing. So if you just are like, I really don't want to sew my own straps, you don't have to, just use the webbing. So if you got this month's bag making bee box, you also got the exclusive tag, which is so stinking cute. Can you see that? It says adventure awaits. It's like a little mason jar with lake and forests and mountains. Ooh, it's so cute. I just love it so, so much. I could not, like, look how this hardware just lays right on top of that little flap there. This pattern, this material, everything about this, I just love it. All right, I'm gonna try to show it to you on. I have lost my step stool, so I think I made these too short. So I'm gonna lengthen these a little bit. And I'll be completely honest with you guys, I don't have the body shape or the posture for backpacks. Backpacks always look a little funny on me, but I'm doing it for you. I'm going to try it on. Let's see. Okay, I think that'll work. They're still a little short for me, but I think it'll work. And again, I have an oversized t-shirt on, which is not the right shirt for these backpacks. Okay, so here's it on the front. We have skinny straps. So again, I'm not sure. I think that if you did the larger Denver, you would have thicker straps, but these are like 3/4 inch straps. And then here it is on the back. This is how it hangs on me. It is really cute. I will tell you that I did put this on my 11-year-old daughter, Mila, and it looked adorable on her. So I think it also would look good on adults. If you like mini backpacks especially, this is a great one. So before we dive into the tutorial, let's just talk about skill level here. I am going to say this is not a beginner bag because there are so many curves, okay? There's just a lot of curves and curves with zippers. So this is a curve with a zipper. You're going to do it twice. Hard? No. These curves are not difficult curves. They actually come together very nicely. The base, this one down here, that's probably the hardest one because you do have some very sharp corners here. That's probably the hardest part, but even the back panel here, these are curves. It's just a lot of curves. So if you haven't done a curvy pattern before, you might want to hold off on this one until you have a little bit more practice with curves and then come back to it. Also, think about your material here. There are some seams down here that are so thick. you could break a needle. So you need to think about that. For example, we have little zipper tabs on our zippers here on the side. I suggest you use lightweight material for those tabs. You'll see why once we get into the tutorial. Quilt cotton, water-resistant canvas, something lightweight. Don't use vinyl for those tabs. You will be so unhappy. So on this one, you can see we just used a canvas material on the back panel, on the front panel, and then we used vinyl on the sides and the bottom. So you can mix up your vinyl, your cork with your more lightweight material. Just think about that. That's all I'm saying, is just think about that. If you go into this with vinyl everywhere, depending on your sewing machine, you might end up very mad. So thank you so much to the Bag Making Bee Club for sponsoring today's video. If you were around for August, you saw that I took a little break, but I'm back. I'm back, baby. So we're back with the cutest backpack ever. Thank you also to Swoon for allowing me to use your patterns on my channel. I'm gonna tell you guys, this is like, I have such a special place in my heart for Swoon patterns, because when I first started my channel and I was reaching out to designers and asking people, hey, is there any way that you could allow me to film a video, a tutorial using your pattern? Swoon was the first person to say yes. Like, Swoon was the first brand to come back and say, have fun. Like, go for it, have a good time. I was rejected by most other people. So I kind of felt like they either were just like, it's fine, like, have fun with it, but I also kind of feel like they believed in me just a little bit, and that means the world to me. So Swoon patterns are a huge favorite on our channel. All right, guys, let's get started. All right, so remember, there are two different sizes here. There's the large and the small. So we're gonna be using requirements for the small pattern. For the small, you're gonna need about 3/8 of a yard of exterior material. This can be quilt cotton, this can be a canvas, this can be a waterproof canvas, which would also be a great option for the backpack. You could use vinyl, but I would suggest you make sure your machine can handle some heavy duty seams, because there are just some sections where you start layering it up a lot. So I would suggest working with a more lightweight material to start this pattern the first time, kind of figure out where those tricky points are, and then you can make another bag with thicker material. You're gonna need about 1/2 yard of lining material. I'm using a water-resistant canvas. This is fantastic for lining because we don't have to add any interfacing to it. It's lightweight, it's not stretchy, and so it's just easy to work with, and it keeps our seams nice and thin. Then you're gonna need about 1 yard of contrasting material. You can use less. Obviously, if you have the kit, you have less than 1 yard of the contrast material. This is really gonna be for a pop for the base, for the pockets. You could also use this if you have a vinyl. You could use it for like the bag straps. You can get very creative with all of this. I'm gonna show you how I like to use these pieces with the different pattern pieces, but you have a lot of wiggle room here to kind of swap out all the pieces however you'd like. Next up, we're going to be using some sew-in foam, which means this is not fusible. Could you use Decovil Light? Yes. Could you use fusible fleece? Yes. However, the point of foam in backpacks is really to protect the items inside, especially if you have like an electronic. So think about that. How are you going to be using this bag? If you're using a mini, maybe you're using it more as a purse, you can use the Decovil Light, you can use the fusible fleece, you'll be fine. I will be showing you how to use the foam. For the foam, you're going to need about 1/3 yard of material. Now, we're not using any woven interfacing today because we don't have any quilt cotton, and it's not in the bee box this month. However, if you have woven interfacing at home, I'm going to give you a tip to use the woven interfacing with the foam to help adhere it without having to baste it on. I'm going to show you how to baste it on, just in case you don't have enough extra interfacing, but I will give you some tips on an easier way to attach a non-fusible foam to panels using woven interfacing. Okay, let's talk about our hardware real quick. I wanna dive into the zippers. Don't cut your zippers yet. Okay, the pattern is assuming you're using a pre-made zipper. So those beautiful metal zippers that have a stopper on the ends, and then they have a little bit of extra tape with no teeth. It's assuming you're using that. So a 9-inch pre-made zipper is not the same as 9 inches of zipper tape. So you're going to be careful with that. If you're using zipper tape like I am, cut your zipper tape down to 9 3/4 inches. You're going to need 3 of those. 3 9 3/4 inch cuts of zipper tape. You're also going to need 3 zipper pulls. I'm using number 5 for everything today. And then you're going to need a little 1/2 inch D-ring, 2 3/4 inch rectangle rings, 2 3/4 inch strap sliders, and 1 3/4 inch swivel hook. And then again, if you have the bee box, you have this super fun tag that Heartwood and Hyde made. It is so detailed, so cute. So that's completely optional, but I always suggest you add a little bit of personalization to your bag with a tag. All right, so here's most of the other stuff I believe that I'll be using today. Lots and lots of clips. I'll be using a Microtex 8012 needle. I find that just works well with everything. The thread I'm using in my top thread, so this is a thread that goes through the needle. This is a polyester bonded thread. This is from Saya Swag. It's a Tex 45 weight thread. The color is buttercream. 45 weight thread works fine on my domestic Bernina. However, it could be a little thick for many machines. Also, it is way too thick for me to use in my bobbins. So you can also look for a Tex 35 weight thread, but a 45 weight thread looks really beautiful with top stitching. For the bottom thread, so the thread that's in the bobbin, I have a Gutermann polyester thread. This is just from Joann's. Next, I always like to have some double-sided tape. I have 1/8 of an inch wide and 1/4 inch wide double-sided tape. I just find that I use these two sizes a lot, so I like to have that on hand. A 1 inch by 6 inch ruler, an air erasing marker, a silver ink marker, a lighter as always, some good scissors, really good scissors to help with cutting down a lot of the very thick seams and then making little notches and things. And then I don't believe I needed this the first time, but I always like to have it on hand just in case. It's some Beacon 3-in-1 glue. Now let's go through the pattern pieces. Let's start with panels A and B. So you have lining and exterior main panel A. So let's go through the lining cuts first. Okay, you have lining panel A and lining panel B. Lining panel A looks like this. The pattern piece is actually like this originally. So when you first print it off and put it together, this is how it's gonna look. Pattern piece A is lined up just like this. The little turned out notch when the material is right side up is on the top right corner. Pattern piece for lining B is flipping this whole unit over, and the top notch is now on the top left. They are mirrored copies. So if you want to get a little sticker or something and label like A and B, that's a good thing to do. I will tell you, I did get confused the first time I made it. I'm hoping for better luck this time. After you cut out your lining pieces, then you're going to cut this little bit off here. You don't need that anymore. And then you're going to cut your exterior pieces. And so you have your exterior piece A and exterior piece B. Exterior piece A, when the exterior is right side up, and you lay your pattern piece on top of it, the notch is in the top right. Exterior piece B, flip over your pattern piece, the notch is going to be in the top left. So do your best to keep this all in mind. I made so many mistakes the first time just because of orientation and not thinking straight with pattern pieces. Hopefully we'll do better today. Okay, next up, let's look at our little side pockets. These are those cute little like puffy pockets on the side. It's such a unique look. Side pocket A looks like this. You're going to have 1 cut of your contrasting material and 2 cuts of your lining material using side pocket A. Side pocket B is just the pattern piece mirrored, so 1 contrast and 2 lining pieces, just like that. So now let's look at the back panel and the base panel. For the back panel, if you're using the B-box, we're using that canvas material. So that brown material there. It does suggest you use the contrasting material. I will tell you, it starts to get very, very beefy in the seams using vinyl so much. So think about that when you're putting this together. Always try the pattern first with lightweight material. But from the back panel, you're going to need your exterior cut, and you're also going to need a lining cut, and you're going to need your foam cut. And then from the bottom panel, you're going to need your contrasting cut, your lining cut, and your foam cut. And finally, here are the other like little bits. You're gonna need your front clip connector. This is gonna be using that pattern piece. This is just that really cool little detail that just covers the end of your zipper and pulls it all together in the end. It's really cool. Then you're gonna need a cut for your bottom clip connector, and then 2 cuts for the bottom strap connectors. And then we have 2 cuts for backpack straps and 1 cut for the handle. Now, you can use webbing for this. I do believe the V-Box has webbing that you can use instead if you don't feel like building your own. But you could also use the material in the box to build your own. So that's what I'm going to be using today because I think it's fun to mix it up. I do believe you have enough material from the lining to also do the backpack straps if you'd like. So you can be creative with how you cut stuff. Have a lot of fun with this. And then finally we have our zipper tabs. Now we're going to change the measurement of this because these are supposed to be cut 1 inch wide, but our zipper tape is wider than 1 inch. So I cut mine to 1 1/4 inch wide. So each of these, instead of being 1 inch, they're 1 1/4 inch. That's just going to make it a lot easier to attach it to our zipper tape. All right, so the only prep work we have to do is attaching our foam to our exterior back and our exterior bottom pieces. Now, here's what I suggest you do if possible, but it's not what I'm going to do. Take your foam piece for each one of these panels and trim off 1/2 inch all the way around. So what you do is you just grab your ruler, measure it up 1/2 inch, trace, 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 trace all the way around, and then cut it down so the whole unit is 1/2 inch shorter on all edges. And then once that's smaller, you're going to center that over the back, the wrong side of your back panel, Completely center it so you should have a strip of the exterior showing all around the edges, and then get a cut of woven interfacing and fuse the woven interfacing over and around the entire back panel. So that way what you're doing is you're fusing the woven interfacing centered on the foam, but on the edges it's fusing it to the exterior material, and it's like a sandwich. It's gonna sandwich this foam in place, and then you're done. You don't have to worry about it at all. You don't have to baste anything, you don't have to cut anything, like you're just ready to go. That is the ideal way to do it. However, I'm not gonna do it today because the box does not have woven interfacing, so we're gonna do it another way, which works just as well. But if you do it that way, do the same thing with the bottom panel. Cut it off a 1/2 inch, use your woven interfacing to sandwich it in. It just makes it so much easier. But what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna baste our foam on and then just kind of cut it out of the seams. It doesn't prevent the foam completely from getting in the seams, but it'll be fine. So take your foam cut and lay it on the wrong side of your exterior material. If you're using this canvas, there's really not a right side or wrong side. Grab your clips and just clip it in place, making sure all the raw edges are matched up. You might find it easier to clip if you have the material right side up and the foam underneath. So repeat that for your exterior piece and your foam base panels. All right, so now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna baste along all the edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance and nice wide stitch, like 5 millimeters. Okay, so here's the thing. When we sew these together later, we will be sewing these things on at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you could baste them at a 1/2 inch seam allowance if you'd like. And then whenever you sew it later, just make sure that you go a little bit inside that original basting stitch. I get a little hesitant with having too many stitches going over the same spot, especially with vinyl, because I feel like eventually it could rip. But that's just something you can do. With a 3/8 inch basting stitch and then a 1/2 inch sewing stitch later, we will be sewing over some of the foam, but I didn't have any problem with my domestic machine. So it's just something to think about. And if you really don't like the idea of it, use fusible fleece for this. Just cut down your fusible fleece so it's the inner side here, the inside here, and then you're done. Easy peasy. But if you use the foam and you basted it like I did, now what you want to do is you want to pull back your material and trim down that foam, because you do want to get it as close to the stitches as you can, just because it'll get so bulky in the seam later that it's hard to get these rounded corners to look nice when you're working with it. So I just go around carefully lifting up the material and trimming down the foam. So do this for both your base panel and your back panel. All right, once you have your bottom and back panels all ready to go, just set them to the side for now. All right, so trim your zipper tape down so that each one of them, you have 3 of them, are 9 3/4 inch long each. If you already cut them down to 9 inches, don't panic. You can modify it. So it will mean you have to recut your zipper tabs, but if you accidentally cut these down to 9 inches each, I would suggest taking your zipper tabs and adding 3/4 inch to the height of each zipper tab. So by doing that, when you fold them in half, each one will have an additional 3/8 inch on the top and the bottom, which will give you an additional 3/4 inch on each tape, and then you should be good to go. So you can fix it if you already cut them to 9 inches. However, if you haven't cut them down yet, cut each zipper tape to 9 3/4 inch in length. If you haven't already, go ahead and attach your zipper pulls to each of your zippers. And do you notice how the zipper tape likes to fray? Grab your lighter and then just melt it down. As long as it's a zipper tape made with plastic fibers, which most zipper tape you find is going to be, you can melt it down and you don't have to worry about the fraying anymore. Now take your zipper tabs and on the back of each one of them, grab a small ruler and measure 1 inch up from the short edge on both short edges. So 1 inch on both short edges. And then take the short raw edge and fold it back, wrong sides together, so the raw edge is meeting that marked line. Do this for both of those short edges. And then take the whole unit and fold it in half so that it's all right sides out. And you can press this with an iron if you'd like. I know this water resistant canvas does fray quite a bit, so be careful with it. Don't start yanking on all those threads. Just kind of trim them down as you're working with it. So do this for the remaining zipper tabs. Once you have these tabs prepped, I like to just open up one edge I know, it's a lot of marking. And I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch from the bottom of the folded edge. So just using a small ruler and a marking pen, 3/8 of an inch on the material. And then I'm going to grab a small piece of double-sided tape. It's just about 1 inch long. And I'm going to adhere my double-sided tape just below that 3/8 of an inch mark that I made. Do your best to keep everything folded as well as possible. Remove the paper. Take your zipper tape, and the raw edge of your zipper tape is going to meet up with that 3/8 of an inch mark, and then just center your zipper tape on the width of the tab and press down onto that tape. So it should look just like this. Make sure everything is folded, and then fold down your zipper tab back in half. And if you need to use more double-sided tape than what I'm using, go ahead. As long as the double-sided tape isn't super sticky, you can use quite a bit of it. So this is how it looks. So the zipper teeth do not extend all the way to the end where the fold is. You don't want them to. I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert. Later in the pattern, you're actually going to fold this whole tab in half and sew it into a seam. If you have zipper teeth here, you're going to break a needle. So you don't want the zipper teeth to come to this fold. You only want it to come 3/8 of an inch up. It's going to make sewing the tip of this easier later. So go ahead and repeat adding these tabs to both sides of 2 of your zippers. The remaining zipper in 1 tab, just leave that to the side for now. All right, so once you have 2 zippers prepped both ends, take your remaining zipper and your remaining 1 tab. And on this one, you want to make sure you add the tab to only the closed end. So you see when I open my zipper, it opens over here on the left. But when I close my zipper, it stays closed always on the right. The tab goes on the closed end. So apply it the same way you did the other tabs. Now that all 3 are prepped, let's take this to the sewing machine, and along the bottom edge of each zipper tab fold, just top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I do like to back stitch at the beginning and the end of each one of these, just to prevent that thread from unraveling while we're working on it. All right, so now grab one of the zippers that has a tab on both ends, and then grab a side pocket A contrasting panel. And if you get confused, if you take your pattern piece and lay it right side up, with the pocket right side up, that's A, okay? So now, with the A contrasting panel right side up, the zipper, when the zipper is closed, it goes up towards the top, okay? It opens down towards the bottom, it closes up towards the top. Take your zipper and lay it right side down, and we're going to attach it to the curve. I know, this is tricky. This bag has a lot of curves, so if you don't have a lot of practice with curves, you're going to get it. So the top corner of our zipper tab is going to line up with the top corner of our side pocket, and then just clip it in place like that. And then keeping it zipper side down, the bottom corner of our tab is going to line up with this bottom corner on the rounded edge, just like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to slowly work the zipper around the curved edge. The zipper is not going to lay flat, it's going to curve up. So this could take a little of finagling. You might have to clip, unclip, reclip, spread stuff out, move stuff around. So you might notice that some spots start getting like really bubbly, so you have to unclip that spot and kind of work out those bubbles, let them distribute a little bit. Mine's not perfectly flat. You can see it does have a wave to it. I find that to be okay. You might find it easiest to open up the zipper. Kind of gives it a little bit more of like a loosey-goosey approach. All right, now once you have this pinned in place, we're going to sew along this edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can baste it if you'd like. If you want to use a longer stitch, you can use a basting stitch for this. And when you're sewing the zipper on, make sure you sew it with the zipper wrong side up on top. That's going to give you a smoother finish versus the wrong side of the contrasting panel on top. Now grab a lining side pocket B, so it's the mirror image. When they're both right side up, it's the mirror image of your contrasting panel, and you're going to flip it so it's right side down, and this right side's against the back of the zipper. And just line it up exactly with that contrasting panel along the curved edge, and use clips to hold this in place. So now I like to sew it this time with the contrasting panel wrong side up so I can see the previous stitching. I'm going to be using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. The pattern does call for a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but I do believe my zipper tape is a little bit wider than what the pattern assumes. Either way will be fine, but I'm going to be using a 3/8 inch seam allowance to sew the zipper and lining and contrasting panels together along this curved edge. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so I'm going to do something. Let's just see if it works out. Because next step is going to be flipping this all right side out along that zipper. And the seam can be a little bulky. So I'm gonna actually try trimming it down, but I'm not trimming the zipper tape. That's the one big thing. Remember how zipper tape frays a lot? I don't want to deal with that. So I'm actually working on just trimming down some of the exterior material. I'm just trimming right along the seam. And then I'll also trim down some of the lining material. Just kind of trimming the lining material in half. Okay, now let's flip this out so it's right sides out, wrong sides together. I like to get the bottom corners clipped together just to make sure as I kind of manipulate it around that zipper, I'm not getting everything all out of place. There we go. And it's easiest if you close the zipper and then just kind of pull along the zipper tape to smooth out that seam. If you're using quilt cotton here, you can use an iron to iron this nice and flat. However, if you're using vinyl, don't do that. Oh yeah, and I think that looks really good. Let's see when we top stitch it. But now we're gonna top stitch right along this edge on the contrasting panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Let me show you the first one I made. I'm not sure if you can tell, but you see how it's kind of bumpy right here by the zipper? And I think it's just because there's too much material there that's a little thick. In the end, it's not something that most people would notice, but if you see this one, we don't have that. It's a lot smoother. Well, that's nice. Okay, so that was a good tip. You should do that. All right, so now grab a lining panel A and take your pre-constructed pocket and flip it so that it is lining side up, zipper tape wrong side up. Taking lining pocket A, flip it right side down so it's right side against the back edge of the zipper. And we're gonna clip it along the other edge of your zipper tape. So I always like to start at the top and the bottom because it is gonna be a bit of a fight. Just do your best. Slowly work on clipping the curved edge to the remaining edge of your zipper. Getting it as flat as possible. All right, and once you have it on there, let's baste along this curved edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, this is your side pocket A. You can now put this to the side. Now, we're gonna grab the contrasting piece for side pocket B, and I'm gonna add my bag tag to this one. You can add your bag tag to the A one if you want to. It doesn't matter. But I'm gonna put it on this one because I forgot to put it on the other one. So I'm gonna grab a little piece of double-sided tape, and I'm just going to tape this on. When it comes to placement for this, I like to just center it. The angle of what this is going to be like when it's all sewn together in the end can be a little tricky, so I'm just going to pretty much center it right on there, far enough away from all the edges that I don't have to worry about it getting in the seam. And I'm just going to top stitch along all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now take contrast panel B for the side panel and your remaining zipper that has tabs on both ends. Once again, check that when the zipper is closing, it's going up towards the top, and then the top is going to line up with the top corner of your contrast panel. Clip that together, curve this around, and clip the bottom corner. We're just going to repeat exactly what we just did with the other pocket, except everything is going to be opposite. I'll walk you through it because I got to do it anyways. So now we're going to clip the material to the zipper, and remember it can be very wavy when you do this, but when you sew it down, as long as you don't sew it with this side up when you baste it, it actually works out. It's a bit of sewing magic, I tell you. All right, once you have it clipped in place, let's baste along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now grab a lining side pocket piece A, and you're gonna lay it right side down along the back side of that zipper and just line it up exactly with that curved edge of your contrasting panel. And then use clips to just hold it all together. And now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. I like to sew it with the contrasting panel faced wrong side up so I can see those stitches already made. All right, and just like I did before, I'm going to just trim down the exterior and the lining, not the zipper. So on the exterior, I can just kind of lift up the material and cut right along those basting stitches because I still have plenty of room next to my stitches. I don't have to worry about cutting too close to the thread and this kind of coming undone at any point. But on the lining panel, even though it's more lightweight material, we're more focused on just cutting the seam in half. All right, now we're going to flip our panels wrong sides together. Close the zipper to help. And once again, Go ahead and line up those bottom corners so that the materials are wrong sides together. Just add a couple clips to the edges just to make sure it's all squared away. Okay, and then I'm just going to give a tug on my zipper so that I can get the seam finger pressed. Nice and smooth. Oh yeah, that looks so good. Okay, and now we're going to go top stitch along the contrasting panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Tell you what, that looks like such a smooth, pretty edge. And my thread color is just similar enough to the material that you can't quite see where I kind of, got a little swervy. I love it. Okay, grab your remaining lining panel B. Take your pocket with the zipper and lay it lining side up. Lining panel B goes right side down. And we're going to just attach this to the remaining edge of our zipper tape. Again, I like to do the corners first and then just work on smoothing it out around the zipper tape. You might actually find it's even easier if you kind of pop the zipper tape up like this. You might find that to be an easier way to clip this in place. All right, once you have that clip, we're just gonna sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so now grab both of your side pockets and your exterior main panels. Now, if you need to, mark the top of your exterior main panel because you might think it's easy to not get confused, but I sewed one of these pockets. Instead of it ending up like this, it ended up, how did it end up? Something even more wild. It ended up like, I don't even know how I did it. It was a mess. So you might want to mark the tops of your panels just so you remember that's the top. So we're going to start with main panel A, which means it looks like this. The little notch is on the top right. So this is right side up. The little notch up here is on the top right. And then you're going to grab side pocket A, and you see how in the end it needs to look just like this. But first we have to sew it together. So to sew this together, both my pocket contrasting materials right side up and my main panel is right side up. I'm going to flip this pocket straight up like this. Okay? So this corner now is with this corner on the main panel, and I'm going to line that up and clip together right there. Then I'm going to take this bottom corner of my main panel and I'm going to lift this up to meet the bottom corner along that curve. So we're attaching this by the zipper. Just don't forget that. You're attaching it by the zipper. So this is kind of the little mess you should have now. And then we're just going to gently go around our zipper and clip the main panel to it. It shouldn't be too difficult to do this. This should be fairly simple. The hardest thing is just setting it up initially and making sure you sew it on correctly. Which for you probably is not that challenging, but for me it was. Okay, so you can kind of flip it over. This gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. So cute. So now I'm going to sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, I'm going to be using the back of the lining so that I can see my stitching, and then make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, you're going to like this. We don't top stitch after that. It's just nice because it's like, oh, we can just leave it alone. Look how cool that is. So it pops out. Isn't that so fun? I just love these pockets. I don't know what it is. They're like little, I don't know. I just love them. I'm going to squeeze the cheeks. So now flip this over and bring that lining panel down to the corner of your other lining panel and your contrasting panel. And I still have the clips from before, so I'm just going to add it in there. And so pretty much what we're doing now is we're squaring it all up so that the raw edges come together. Here's the tricky part, okay? Here's the tricky part. Up here on this tab, you're going to fold the tab in half like this so that the zipper is like pointed up and then the top of the tab is also pointed up. This gets bulky. This is why I'm using the water resistant canvas. On the previous bag, I did use just the regular brown canvas. I would say the bulk is probably about the same. I would not suggest using vinyl for these tabs. I think that would be a bad idea. So you want to fold the tab in half. It's not going to lay flat. Same thing with the bottom edge over here. We're going to take the tab, and you're not folding the back lining piece. So this back lining piece over here, you're not doing that. You're just folding the tab. So the tab is going to fold in half so that it's pointing away and the zipper is pointing up, and then just clip it while it's folded in half, and then finish clipping the raw edges. And that's the thing, if you're like, oh wow, that's already really bulky, we still have to sew this to other materials. So you want to use lightweight material for those tabs. So now we're going to just baste this down at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you go over the tabs. The zipper foot's very handy here. This is also, again, why it's nice that your zipper teeth are not extending all the way to the edges, or else you would definitely be very angry right now. All right, so this is what your main panel A should look like now. Just to check, grab your lining main panel A, lay it right side up. Take the panel you just made, lay it right side up. Kind of line up the corners. Now, I find that this doesn't reach all the way down when it's laid like this because it is poofy, right? So eventually what you're going to do is you're going to kind of pull it down like that. So it's okay if you kind of have to stretch it a little bit, but for the most part, it should be about the same size. Again, if it doesn't, you can't lay it flat, but just make sure that it's all oriented the right way. This will also let you know if you sewed your pocket on all wonky or something. So now we're going to repeat that with main panel B. Once again, make sure you have your material for B right side up, the notch is on the top left, and then take your B side pocket and lay it right side up like this, just kind of snugging it into this little corner here. Make sure it looks okay, and then we're going to flip it directionally up like that. So we're going to just flip it up like that, line up that top corner of the pocket with the top corner of the curved bit of your main panel, and then take the bottom corner by the curve and lift it up to meet the bottom corner where your zipper is. And then I like to just kind of flip it and slowly add clips along the edge of your zipper tape, just putting the main panel and the side pocket together. All right, now once again with the back of the lining wrong side up, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch along this pinned edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, making sure to back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that stitched on, just lay it right side up. And I'm telling you, if you were to sew that with this side up, I bet you would get little puckers and pleats. But by sewing it like this, it's just magic. I'm telling you, it's magic. So now we're going to take the bottom corner of the back lining and we're going to just line it up with the bottom corner and raw edges of the other lining. And then once again, our little tabs over here, we're going to fold them in half so that the zipper is pointing up and away from the pocket. Just give it a little fold and clip together. Do the same thing with the other tab, folding it up and away from the pocket. So now let's go baste along the sides of our bottom pocket here, also making sure you're basting over that folded tab to like hold it in place. We're gonna do that at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And there you go. Your panel B is now done. Most of your exterior is just about done. Now let's work on the handle and backpack straps. And if you're using webbing for this, then just ignore it. You don't have to do it. But I will be using double-sided tape to help with all this. So on the back side of your handle, mark a midpoint line running along lengthwise. And let's see, I'll use tape. I'll use a little bit of tape for this. So I like to run the tape right over that midpoint line, just centered on it. And then remove the paper from the tape. Take your long raw edge and fold it wrong sides together, so back, so that that raw edge meets that midpoint line, and just add it to the tape. Do the same thing on the other side. So you can see your raw edges are now tucked in on the back here. And then fold the whole unit in half once again, kind of like a hot dog bun. And this is where I like to add clips. You could add tape, but it's really not necessary. And then you can just set this to the side. Now we are going to repeat that with the backpack straps. I'm probably not going to use tape for this just because it is a lot of tape and I got to pay for that. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just folding this in half because with the canvas I can kind of see this crease here. So that way I don't have to mark a midpoint line on the back side. I can just get it by folding it. Now if you're using quilt cotton, you can do the same thing. Grab an iron, fold it in half and press it. And that way you don't have to mark anything. Fold it open so you can see that midpoint fold. And then once again, take those long rod edges back to meet that midpoint. And then I just finger press it and use clips. Once you have one side folded back, repeat that with the other long side, just like we did with the handle. All right, and then once you have all that, fold it in half again, like the longest hot dog bun in the world, and just add all the clips together to hold it in place. And there you go, it's one strap prepped. Go ahead and repeat that with your other backpack strap. All right, once you have both your backpack straps and your handle all prepped, take these to the sewing machine and top stitch along all the edges, mainly the two long edges, but I just top stitch along all four edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. right, now grab your 2 backpack bottom strap connectors and lay them wrong side up, and then measure a midpoint mark on the back of each one of these. We're going to use double-sided tape again to help hold this in place. So I just run the double-sided tape right over that midpoint mark, centering it as best I can. And you can remove the paper and fold the raw edges, wrong sides together to meet that midpoint line. So do this for both long edges. And don't worry, we're not folding this. We're not folding this like a hot dog bun this time. So if you're like, this is teeny tiny, yeah, we're not folding it again. We're just gonna leave it like this. Now, grab your rectangle ring, and you're gonna thread this around the rectangle ring so that the back with the raw edges comes together. So you only have the pretty side showing on either side here. Line up those bottom short edges and clip together. If you prefer to tape these together, you can, or you can just use clips. That's what I'm gonna do. Then repeat that with your other connector. Now we're going to take these to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along these folded edges and just underneath where the metal bar of the rectangle ring is, and then back along the other side at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I find this easiest to do with a zipper foot, so that way I can get pretty close to the bar over here without hitting it. And just the cutest little tabs. They just look so fancy. Okay, so now we're going to attach a bunch of this stuff to the back panel. So grab your exterior back panel and make sure you also have the template for it, because we need to mark some stuff. So let's start with the bottom strap connectors. Let's make sure our bottom corner of our template is lined up. So you can see right here there are lines for strap placement. One of the things you really want to pay attention to is the diagonals going. So I like to kind of just lift this up and then just draw right underneath where these lines are. And you can draw that diagonal line as long as it's staying within the seam allowance. So as long as it doesn't go past those basting stitches, you're fine. So what we're going to do now is just flip this over. You can see I kind of drew the lines on the back by holding it up and tracing it. Whatever works. And we're going to mark those same lines on the other bottom corner. All right, now let's mark the top lines. So the top is going to be for the handle and also the backpack straps. So you have strap placement here for the backpack straps, handle placement here. Once again, just make sure you're marking the placement and also the diagonal which it's going. And then once you have them marked on one side, flip this over and repeat with the other side. So let's first start with the handle and the strap connectors, starting with the handle, whichever side you want to be down, up. Think about your top stitching. You're going to see both sides of the handle, so it doesn't really matter. But the inner sets of the marking, so I have this marking in the center is actually the midpoint mark, so don't get confused if you have the midpoint mark. But the inner sets on the left and the right, closest to the midpoint mark, are where we're going to put our handle. So we're just going to line it up on one side like this, and then keep it straight, flip it up, and then line it up with the other handle placement marks. And now we're going to take our strap connector and we're going to line it up with the marks on the bottom here. Now, you want the top corner to overhang. So match up the bottom corner with the edge of the material and then make sure you angle it just like your marks suggest and clip in place. So you will have overhang of your strap. Do the same thing with the other one. All right, now we're gonna go stitch all these on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. There we go. That part's done. Let's work on the backpack straps now. So now you're gonna need your back panel, your 2 backpack straps, and your 2 strap adjusters. Let's do this one at a time. Take one backpack strap and lay it wrong side up. So for me, wrong side is the bobbin thread side up. And you're going to insert it up and over the center bar of your slider, just like that. Your raw edge will come over by about 1/2 of an inch. If you want to use rivets here, definitely go for that. That's much easier to do. But we're going to stitch this in place carefully. So when stitching this down, you just need to be really careful to not hit the slider. To do that, I suggest using a zipper foot, maybe letting this extend a little bit further, the little raw edge over here. And we're just going to sew a little rectangle, just a teeny tiny rectangle going over the top stitching we already have, just to hold this in place. Go ahead and do this for both of your backpack straps. So once the sliders are stitched in place, now we're going to attach them to the back. And here's how you're going to do it. Take your backpack strap so that the raw edge is facing up by the slider, just like that, and lay it right on top of the back panel. Keeping the strap straight, you're going to take the opposite end and thread it from underneath up through the rectangle ring, and then you're going to fold it in half just like this. Thread it through the side of the slider that has the raw edge overhanging, up and over that middle bar. There you go. So it looks just like this. Attached to the bottom edge, slider is facing up, it's not upside down like this, and then you have your raw edge, and then the remaining raw edge over here is going to line up with those backpack strap marks on the top left side, since we're working on the left side, and you can just clip in place. Now we're going to repeat that with the right side. So once again, just making sure the back side of your strap is up, and then slide it from underneath up and over that rectangle ring, and then up and over the middle bar of your slider, and then clip it into the marked space on the top. So this is how it looks, and now let's go stitch down these top edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have it stitched in place, get these straps as short as they will go so that they stay out of the way. Even then, they'll still try to get in the way, but just try to get them as short as possible so you can tuck them in. Okay, put this little mess to the side for now. Okay, take your remaining zipper. I did not realize this when I made this the first time, and I was very confused sewing this together. Take the remaining zipper that you have, and you know how we have the fold over here on the end of the zipper tape? Slide your scissors in there and cut right along the fold, just like that. So you have 2 separate ends. That's gonna make sewing this together easier. So now grab main panel A and lay it right side up. Take your zipper and you're gonna lay it right side down, and the tab is gonna go up here towards the top left. Line up the very corner of that tab with the very corner of the top of your main panel A, and then just clip along the straight edge. I know, we're finally sewing like straight edges. It feels nice. Don't get used to it. We got a lot more curves in our future. Okay, and just if you want to double check, from the raw edge of your zipper tape to the very edge over here, not the edge of the slot, but the very right edge over here, should be about 1 inch. Now on the tab side, move your clip out of the way, and mark a tiny line right along the edge that is 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge here on the left. So now we're going to sew along this top edge here at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but we're going to start at this mark and we're going to go all the way to the end. This can be a basting stitch if you'd like. Once you have that zipper attached, grab lining panel B and lay it right side down over the back of the zipper, and it should, you know, the little slots, the little notches over here, those should match up. So then just match it up with that top edge that you just sewed. And now flip this over, and we're going to sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. That's what I choose to do. The pattern says 1/4 inch. I'm going to sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance because, again, my zipper is a little bit wider. But we're going to go all the way from the notched edge, and we're going to stop at that 5/8 of an inch mark. So if you can see the stitching, that's great. If you need to make another mark on the back here, you can do that. You just want to make sure you stop. You don't go all the way to the end. Once you have it sewn in place, we're going to press both panels away from the zipper. So I like to just finger press it. I'm just going to move it up and press with my fingers. You can definitely iron this. You can iron both sides if you'd like, but I find finger pressing is fine. I always like to match up the bottom corners as well. I find that helps me kind of move everything where it needs to go. All right, so then just kind of tug on the zipper, flatten it out really nicely. And now let's top stitch along the edge by the zipper, but again, stopping 5/8 of an inch from the edge of your zipper tab. So if you need to, go ahead and mark that, or you can just kind of flip it up and make yourself a little crease so you remember this is where you're going to stop. I do like to back stitch at this top stitching mark, at least on this side over here. Okay, and if at some point this edge of your zipper comes undone, that's fine. This can open up. Just if you're using zipper tape, be very careful because you don't want to lose your zipper. You really don't want to lose your zipper. I don't even know how to put the zipper back on if it does get lost this way because our other end is closed. So reattaching it wouldn't work. So don't lose your zipper. So now grab your main panel B and lay it right side up. And we're just going to repeat all this. So take your unit with the zipper and lay it zipper right side down. Line up the top corner of your zipper tab with the top corner of main panel B. And then just clip along this top straight edge. And then once again on the zipper tab, measure 5/8 of an inch from the end. And then just mark a line so you know to stop sewing there. And now let's stitch along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, stopping at that marked spot. And again, this can be a basting stitch if you prefer. Now with the zipper wrong side up, take lining panel A and lay it right side down. And line it up with the top edge where your zipper is and clip together. And then flip this over so you're looking at the back of your main panel. And we're going to just stitch this down at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure that you don't go past that 5/8 inch mark over by the zipper tab. Once you have that sewn, press both panels away from the zipper and wrong sides together. Just like I did on the other side, I do like to line up these corners. If all the edges don't line up exactly, that's perfectly fine. Actually, we kind of want the lining to be a little bit smaller in the end because it can be pretty baggy in there. So don't worry about it. All right, and then press right along that zipper. And now let's top stitch along the zipper, making sure that you stop or start 5/8 of an inch from the edge over here. So you're not going all the way over the zipper tab. All right, if you have the lining and exteriors clipped together, go ahead and unclip them. Need them all separate now. Now we're going to take the two exterior pieces and we're going to flip them up right sides together. And we're worried about the side here that has the little notch, okay? So the little notched out corner there, line up these two long edges from your exterior panel and clip together, right sides together. So now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. So now take your zipper pull and pull it all the way back towards the tab. So it's nowhere near the end. And you're going to open up the end of your zipper. Now this part's a little tricky, so just do your best. Just remember, you're not going to be able to get the whole bag flat, and it doesn't need to be flat. Only the section that you're sewing needs to be flat. So I am pressing the seam that we just made open. I'm on the wrong side, pressing that seam open all the way to the top. So all the way up to the top edge here, all of it open. And I'm going to start at the bottom here, and I'm going to top stitch on one end of the seam at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, pivot, and then top stitch down on the other end at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, constantly checking that my seam on the back is pressed open. If it makes it easier for you to kind of pull some of this lining out like that, then go ahead and do that. But just keep everything else out of the way while you're doing this. So tuck the lining back in, making sure, again, the zipper's over there. And I know some of you guys are thinking like, well, that's not a cute finished edge. Remember, this gets covered up with that little detail in the end, so don't even worry about it. This can look kind of messy, it's okay. So now we're going to do sort of the same thing with the lining. So pull this out so that the lining is now right sides together. And again, we're working on the edge of the lining that has that notch. So line up the straight edge where that notch is and clip together. And now let's sew along this lining edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. And then for the lining, you don't have to top stitch. We're just going to trim down the seam on the lining, just about 1/8 of an inch. There we go. Okay, now we're going to attach the back panel. So make sure you have the midpoints marked on the top and the bottom edge of your back panel. And then take your exterior unit here. You can move the zipper a little bit out of the way, but don't get it too close to that open edge. And we're just going to take our back panel and lay it right sides together with our main panel. Now keep those straps out of the way. It's going to be kind of a wrestling match. You'll be okay. So take the tab. Remember, we have our zipper tab here, and it splits open because we cut it. Take the tab that's towards the exterior and pull it so that the center of that tab matches up with the midpoint mark on the top curved edge of your back panel. Once you have those two matched up, use some clips to clip together, making sure you fold in the edges of your back panel. There we go. And just keeping that other tab out of the way, keeping that tab, that's going to be attached to the lining. So once you have the center done, go down to the bottom corner and line up the bottom corner. I still have that overhang of my tab over here. That's okay, I can fix that later. And now we'll do the same thing on the other corner, and you see I like to just kind of keep shoving in those straps. It would be so sad if you accidentally sewed in a strap into the seam. So just pay attention to that. Okay, so once you have the midpoint and corners done, we're sewing more curves here. So clip along the sides where the edge is just straight or just slightly curved for as far as you can go before the curve gets more severe. And then once you get to that sharper curve up here, you just kind of have to smush the back panel in, kind of like a bowl, and then pull the exterior panel up. And it should just wrap around each other. I didn't have to clip into anything. I don't have to have any material spread. It should just kind of come together pretty easily. And with the canvas does have some give, a little bit of stretch to it, so you can manipulate it to get it to where you want it to go. Okay, just double check that you don't have any backpack straps in your seam, your lining is all out of the way. It looks wild, but it's gonna work. So now we're gonna sew along this clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. After I sew it once, I'm gonna sew it a second time, just a little bit outside that original 1/2 inch seam allowance. So like a little bit, just a tiny bit closer towards the raw edges. That little bit of extra stitching really helps strengthen those seams. So as it's being moved around, pushed, you don't see the stitches in the end. So when you're sewing this on, you want to make sure you're sewing it on with the back panel down and the exterior up. That's going to be the best way to do it, and you want to use a zipper foot because you got to get really close to some of these bits over here. And the nice thing too about the second row of stitching when you do this is that if there was some areas like over here, I had an area where I had a hard time with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. When I go over it a second time, I can get a little bit closer and really tuck in that seam to make it nice and crisp, and then just keep adding my reinforcement stitches as well. All right, once you have this sewn, you can just trim your seam allowance in half. So my rule of thumb is I don't go past the second row of stitching, but just pretty much just trim the seam allowance in half. And making sure you're careful here at the top so you don't accidentally cut the tab you haven't sewn yet. And if you want to cut this with pinking shears, you're more than welcome to do that. It's going to be kind of a mess, but you can do it. So now we're going to repeat this with the lining, but on this lining one, on one of the long edges of the back piece here, you're going to want to mark a 6 to 7 inch opening. I'm going to go with a 6 inch opening, and that's how we're going to turn the bag out in the end. So I like to mark it on my main panel because that's what I'm going to see when I'm sewing. Make sure you have the midpoints marked on the top and the bottom of your back panel. And then take your back panel and lay it right sides together with your lining main panels. And then the top of that curved back panel is going to line up with the middle of the remaining zipper tab. So clip those together. And then again, just making sure that that little fold over that you have on the top here of your lining, just fold it over and tuck this in. And then match up the bottom corners with the corners of your exterior panel. It's weird shapes, I know. Even now it's like, how is this going to work together? This doesn't make any sense. Sewing magic, guys. Sewing magic. So now let's clip along the straight edges until you get up to the curved bit. And then once you get to the curved bit, I just tuck it in. I am not that precise when it comes to lining. If I have some pleats or little crinkles in my lining, I'm okay with that. It's not noticeable. All right, now sew along this clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure you pay attention to where you left your mark, where I leave my mark, your 6 inch mark or 7 inch mark, making sure you leave that open. So start at the bottom, backstitch when you start. When you get to that mark, backstitch there, lift up your needle, skip over that opening, go to the next mark, backstitch, continue around 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that sewn, we're gonna trim the seam allowance. Sorry, where is it? We're gonna trim the seam allowance just like we did before, except don't trim the seam allowance where the opening is, so leave that. But trim around it. So down here on the bottom, just gonna trim it down. And the lining you can do about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can get pretty close for the lining. But once again, be careful when you're trimming it down up here at the very top, because there's a lot going on up there. Okay, your main body is done. Now we just have to prep the bottom panel and attach it. And then we're pretty much done, guys. So grab both the bottom panel lining and the contrast, and make sure you have the midpoints already marked. My midpoints are marked because that's what I marked when I was tracing the pattern pieces. Now grab your bottom clip connector and your little 1/2-inch D-ring and some double-sided tape. On the back of the clip connector, go ahead and mark a midpoint line running along the length of it. And then grab some double-sided tape and add it right over that line. And take the paper off the tape and fold the long edges back, wrong sides together to meet that line and stick in the tape. I know this gets very, very skinny, but you should be able to get it stuck on there pretty well. And then you're going to thread this through your D-ring so that the folded over edges on the back wrap around the straight edge of the D-ring, and then bring the short edges up to meet one another. You can use clips here to help hold it together because it is so tiny. Okay, just like we did with the other strap connectors, we're gonna just top stitch along the edges and then also right underneath the straight edge of your D-ring, and then down the other edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now grab your contrasting bottom panel and lay it right side up, and then take your little D-ring connector here and lay it right side down and match it up with the midpoint mark on the curved edge. You can clip it in place and then just sew it on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now grab your bag and your bottom panel. Shove those backpack straps back in there. Look at them trying to escape. What on earth? So the straight edge of your bottom panel is going to line up with the bottom straight edge of your back panel. So start there. Start with matching those midpoint marks up first and clip together. And these are the trickiest curves in the bag. They are tricky. I do have to cut into some of the seams in order to get them to spread around. But one thing at a time, right? One thing at a time. So we have the back panel marked. So now let's flip this around. And now find that seam running along the front of the exterior. And you're going to match up that seam with the midpoint mark on the rounded edge of your bottom panel. And then clip together there. All right, now I like to kind of pop it up like this. I'm just going to kind of push in my bottom panel like a bowl and get it tucked around all these corners. And this does take some heavy finagling. Now, if you get to a point like I do where it's just too much, grab your scissors and cut into your seam. No more than, 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch. And just cut in like that where it's really difficult. And you'll find that it becomes much easier to spread out the material so that it can wrap around that bottom panel. Okay, so I have one corner. It's nice and spread out. Again, I'm not clipping into the base panel at all. I'm just making cuts into the main panel because that's what needs to spread out. I don't know if you can tell when I'm working with this, it's not easy. It's not gentle. So I'm really like pushing in and then spreading apart that clipped edge to get it to flatten out and work with my base panel. And so when I do that, when I force it flat, it looks fine, right? It looks pretty flat. But then when I let go of it, you see it gets wrinkly again. That's okay. As long as we don't sew with this side up, that's okay. Go around, make sure everything looks pretty good. Remember, we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so that does allow us a good amount of wiggle room here. If things move around, shift around a little bit, it'll be okay. Alrighty, so now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine, and I know it seems like you shouldn't do it this way, but you should. The bag part needs to be up, so we're gonna sew it like this. Don't sew it like this. I know you think it's not gonna be better. Sew it like this, 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around, then do another row of stitching just outside of it, so just to the right of those 1/2 inch stitches. Again, because you're gonna need that reinforcement. There are a lot of moments of bulk down here, so you need to reinforce it. Okay, in my opinion, that's the hardest part. parts. So what you want to do real quick is just reach in and make sure none of your straps got caught in the seam. I know it's hard to tell, but yeah, that's very difficult. That is a difficult bottom to do, but you can do it. I believe in you. So now we're going to trim down the seam allowance. I'm just going to trim it down in half. I'm not going to trim further than the second row of stitches that I did. But by trimming a thinner seam, that helps with, you know, the corners spreading out. So, you know, sometimes on corners, what we'll do is we'll trim in little bits like that, or like little triangles. That also helps the corners, those rounded corners, just spread out and look nicer in the end. But trimming down the seam has a similar effect. It's just a little bit more dangerous because you could accidentally cut your stitching, or you could cut too close to the stitching, and then when too much pressure gets put on the bag, it could just rip open. So I just trim about halfway through. All right, so once you have the exterior done, now we're gonna do the lining, and it's the same thing, except you don't have to worry about it looking as nice. Because remember, again, it is the lining. And for this one, if you want to increase the seam allowance to 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, that's fine, to kind of help prevent having such a saggy lining. Because of the shape of this bag, there's not a lot of opportunities to increase the seam allowance so that it's a little bit of a tighter fit. But down here, if you feel comfortable doing that, you can do that. It's already hard enough doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance, in my opinion. And I don't think it looks bad if it's a little baggy on the inside. So once again, I am going to clip into the rounded edges by about 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, just to make it easier to spread around this corner. All right, once you have it clipped, once again, it's easiest if you have it like this. I know it's kind of, it doesn't seem easiest that way, but it is. So at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance around the whole bottom edge. You don't have to do a second row of stitching on the lining. Once you have the lining bottom sewn on, let's just trim down this seam, and you can trim this one down to like 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so this is what you have now. It should look pretty wild. So reach in, make sure your zipper is all the way open, because again, we don't want that zipper pull getting anywhere near the end. And let's gently pull the bag out through that lining hole that you left. Just gently. You can still rip the lining, and we don't want to do that. Pulled out, gently run your fingers along the seam for the exterior bottom. All right, now before we're all done with the bag portion, we need to close up this hole on the side over here. So I like to just get it nice and flat along the seam, put your fingers inside and just kind of tug lightly, and all the raw edges should just fold in on themselves, and then you can kind of just roll out the seam. Add some clips to make it look nice and neat. I always forget I have my own little woven bag tags, so I'm just going to stick one of these OklaRoots woven bag tags right into that seam, so when I stitch it closed, you know who made it. All right, so now I'm just going to top stitch right over this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching it at the beginning and the end. Once you have that edge sewn up, go ahead and tuck in your lining. I just love this little backpack so much. It's so cute. Okay, now we're going to finish up this raw edge bit right here. I am going to carefully, super carefully, not all the way, get my zipper close. I just need to get it lined up. But I'm going to get my zipper pulled close to the edge, but not close enough to accidentally lose it. Because what I want to do is I just want to fold this into a nice little triangle just like this, so I can see how it's centered. And I'm going to add some clips to the edge here. And I am just going to quickly stitch right over, just a horizontal line right over the zipper teeth and this edge over here to hold it together before we do the next step. Okay, so now I don't have to worry about the zipper coming off, and this is all nice and put together. I don't have to wrestle with it. So now grab the front clip connector, and on the back side, on these like little V shapes here, measure 1/2 of an inch in from each one and just draw a line. Grab some double-sided tape and put a piece of double-sided tape just underneath each one of these lines. It's just like an inch long piece of tape. And then remove the paper from the tape and fold the parallel raw edges, wrong sides together to meet those marked lines, and add it to the tape. Let's do this for the full side, and you might notice that it starts to kind of lift up a little bit. That's okay. It's okay if it kind of does that. That's all right. So do this for the other side as well. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along these folded edges entirely at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. We're not worried about these raw edges yet, just these folded long edges. Okay, so once you have the sides top stitched, flip it over and mark 1/2 of an inch from each short raw edge. And then once again, grab a couple pieces of tape and apply the tape just below those marked lines. And then remove the paper and fold the raw edges back to meet those marks. Now grab your swivel and just thread your connector through the straight part of your swivel and have it wrap around the bottom straight edge of the bar. And if you want, you can use some clips to help keep everything in place, because I know mine is fighting me right now. Where are you going? Stay there. All right, so now we want to just top stitch right below the bar. So I like to use a zipper foot for this, and I'm just going to go from one edge to the other, just top stitching, and that's just going to keep this little swivel hook in place. So now all we have to do is attach this to the tip of our zipper. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to open it up like this, wrap it around, find a good spot for it, and then sew it on. It's very simple, very, very simple. Double-sided tape is going to be our friend here though. So I'm going to use some more double-sided tape. You just don't want this moving around on you when you're stitching it down. So you can see I'm adding tape over tape. And that's why it's important that the tape you're using isn't super duper sticky, or else you're going to gum up your needle and you won't even be able to sew through it. Luckily this is very easy tape. So I removed the paper from the bottom edge here, and I'm just going to wrap this around using the top to figure out where I want it. And then I'll stick the bottom up here. There we go. I just eyeball this. I just want it to kind of meet here, you know. And then I'll remove the tape from the top piece here and tape that down. Now all we have to do is top stitch along this top folded edge through all the layers at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. It shouldn't be that much bulk. I mean, you're just sewing through the zipper and a couple layers of material. So, but you might want to, you know, make sure your needle isn't too thin or dull. And if you need to, you can adjust your tension on your machine. All right, once you have a top stitch in place, you see you can just use this little clip down here, link it to that D-ring, close up your zipper. How stinking cute is this? Isn't this just the cutest little backpack? I adore it. I hope you love making this. This was years in the making for me, and I'm so tickled by how it turned out. I hope you love it as much as I do. All right, guys, what did you think? Tell me the truth. These down here, right where these zipper tabs are, those are tricky. Those are tricky. And you guys, you want to see something? I haven't taken it up. I've now made this bag twice. I got little twinsy babies here. And I'm just so tickled by them. I just love these little bags so much. They're so cute. I'm going to probably have to gift one of those to someone. I hope you love making this pattern. I'm so excited to make more of these. I really am. I'm excited to use lots of different types of materials for the main panel, for the sides. I mean, we are so lucky as bag makers to have so many options of not only beautiful material, like any color, any design, anything you can think of, it's out there, but types of material. We have material that is nylon and like already has interfacing on it for us. Like we have so many different types of materials out there. We have vinyl that looks really strong and heavy duty, but it's actually really lightweight and easy to sew with. So this is one of those bags where you can just like go to town with it. Just have so much fun. Just please promise me that you will always use lightweight material on these zipper tabs. Please don't use vinyl on the zipper tabs. So I hope you love making this bag as much as I do. I know you will, because there's no way you can't not. This is just the cutest little thing in the world. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for watching today's tutorial. I hope that you are inspired to go make something and have a lot of fun with these patterns. If you're not already subscribed, please make sure you click subscribe down below. Also make sure you hit that little bell, the little notification bell. That's gonna make sure you're notified every single time we have a new video or when we go live. For even more fun content from OklaRoots, make sure you're following us on Facebook and Instagram. We do daily stories over there, which include unboxing, talks about books, other little mini tutorials, lots and lots of discussion over all kinds of things going on. You can also find us on TikTok and also on Reels for even more fun, kind of more random content. And if you really want to dive in for some behind the scenes content, free gifts, access to shop items before anybody else, and influence on upcoming videos, make sure you go check out OklaRoots over on Patreon. We have a lot going on over there and it's a fun place to hang out, and you are directly supporting the OklaRoots YouTube channel. These videos could not be possible without the help of my patrons. So thank you so much to everybody over there. Thank you again for watching today's tutorial. I hope you enjoy the videos. Go make something.